X-Files night on BBC Two. Later, there's a chance to see the first ever episode of The X-Files. Also, an episode of The Simpsons, new to the BBC, where FBI agents Mulder and Scully help solve a mystery in Springfield. But first, a profile of the man who started it all, X-Files creator Chris Carter.
The secret to the show's success internationally is that we're all basically afraid of the same things. We're all basically afraid of violent death. We're afraid of what we don't know. We're afraid of what we can't see. Afraid of what we don't understand.
What is the explanation? Who knows?
The X-Files' success is so off the chart that you can't actually ever hope to create a show this successful again because it may be one in a lifetime. You can't manufacture that kind of success. It's chemistry that needs to happen like magic.
This once-in-a-lifetime success, syndicated worldwide, and now in its 8th season, comes straight from the imagination of one man, Chris Carter. But instead of warp drive, galaxies and final frontiers, The X-Files is rooted in a different type of science fiction, featuring extraterrestrial biological entities, alien abductions, and good old-fashioned horror stories. Taking us through almost 200 episodes is one of television's great screen partnerships. FBI agents Fox Mulder and Dana Scully.
You wouldn't shoot an unarmed man, would you, copper?
The series extracts its drama from an endless war to turn skeptics into believers, taking us beyond the limits of conventional science and pitching the viewer against government conspiracy and cover-up. But the brains behind this paranormal hit grew up in a place that could not have been more normal.
I grew up in a little town, a suburb of Los Angeles in Southern California. The town was called Bellflower. Even though we were 25 minutes maybe from Los Angeles, it could have been the Midwest because it had a very small town quality to it. High school football games were still very important. Sports were still extremely important. There was a community that sort of came out to support all these things. It really felt like a very typical American town, a Midwestern town. And that's where I really gained all of my values. I learned social skills. I formed long-time friendships. And I don't think that life has ever been the same since I really moved away from Bellflower. I often wonder where this need to scare people comes from. And I remember when you see movies or you see TV shows, the burglars, the bad guys always break into your house and the first thing they steal is the silverware. And I don't know why they stole the silverware as a kid, but I was sure that every night when I was babysitting my brother, that I could hear the silverware rattling around in the drawers. And, you know, we had hot metal utensils, forks, knives. There's nothing to steal, but I was sure that that's what I heard downstairs. I had a vivid imagination, and I think that and a love of shows like Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, all those things were swirling around in my head. I wasn't all that interested in futuristic science fiction. I was interested in more sort of escapist fare, I'd say. I think real early on, I first got turned on to reading by my mom, who had read all the Nancy Drew books as a kid. And while it may seem strange that a boy would be reading Nancy Drew when he's supposed to be reading Hardy Boys, I had the biggest crush on Nancy Drew. I was in love with her, and I read all of those books over and over. I think it's actually where I developed the love of mystery. She's smart and beautiful, and you can actually see a little bit where Dana Scully comes from if you ever read Nancy Drew.
Carter's growing appetite for urban horror was fed by one particularly ghoulish 70s TV movie.
When I was about 14 years old, there was a movie on called Kolchak the Night Stalker, and it was the best thing I had ever seen on television. Where this character Kolchak, who's a newspaper reporter, hunts down vampires in this movie, and he comes back and he tells his boss, the head of the newspaper, what he's found, and his boss won't believe him.
Vampire killer in Las Vegas, question mark. Do I misread?
The story makes it clear.
Do I misread, or did you use the word vampire?
Some screwball who imagines he's a vampire is loose in Las Vegas, and people ought to be told.
If there's a screwball running around loose in Las Vegas, his last name begins with a K.
He is an outsider, as you feel like a kid. No one will believe you. You are, it's you against the adults. Karl Kolchak was a sort of, he was a kindred spirit. Anyway, but the movie, most importantly, was as scary as I'd ever seen at that point. 20-some years later, when I'm working in television myself, I had earned the, privilege of being asked what kind of TV show I wanted to do. I said I wanted to do something as scary as I remember The Night Stalker was. Bellflower High was a school where I would say a very small percentage of kids went to college, and expectations were very low. But I put myself through college, holding some odd job as one which I would hold for a good many years afterwards. I became a master potter. I sat at a potter's wheel for hours on end and made the same thing over and over. Repetitively, I made dinnerware. Being a person from a small town where you needed a skill in order to make a living, at least that's what I was taught. The first thing I did when I went to school, knowing that I wanted to be a writer, was I went into the journalism program. And I learned how to make money writing. In fact, that's what I did. When I got out of college, I took a job at a magazine, surfing magazine. It was really, for me, that was more of a decision not to grow up, not to join the adult world. But it was a wonderful experience. I spent 5 years working for Surfing Magazine. I made no money. I traveled the world. I lived in a tent. I slept on people's floors. It was a great time in my life. I learned a lot about discipline, writing anywhere and everywhere. I had a great physical life. I was in Australia and the Caribbean, wherever, surfing and writing, and just having a great time. If I had to describe myself, I'd describe myself as a surfer first and everything else after that. The moment I knew I really wanted to make movies is when I saw the first Indiana Jones movie. It just blew me away. I could not believe what I was seeing on the screen, and I probably saw it every night for the next week. It was like my world changed. It was like I realized that I could take my talent and my tremendous work ethic and apply it to something that would be both visual and a great way to tell stories, which is what I was most interested in.
By this time, Carter had married a Hollywood scriptwriter and had the contacts and confidence to pursue his new, bigger ambitions.
I came to Hollywood very quickly, and my entry was a little unexpected. I had written a script, and that script was seen by a few people. I got some meetings around town. An agent signed me, and in the course of, it felt like about a month, I'd been hired for a 3-picture deal with Disney, and here was this kid, plucked out of the surf and put into his office in Hollywood and, told to create. Because I'd come from a surfing magazine, because I had the voice of sort of contemporary youth in my head, and I could write that kind of story, write that kind of character, I was kind of pigeonholed. I first went to work for Disney, and I wrote Disney Sunday movies, and I wrote about kids, and I wrote about kids' relationships and teen relationships. And then I went to work on a TV show called Rags to Riches.